My name is Willie. I'm 18 years old. And this is the story of how my sister faked cancer to ruin my Ivy League dream, and how I exposed her in front of everyone she fooled. I grew up in a small town just outside of Denver, Colorado, where pine trees lined the roads and neighbors always waved even if they didn't know your name. My childhood wasn't terrible, not in the physical sense. But it was haunted by one thing. One person. My sister, Haley. Haley is 4 years older than me. And if you asked anyone in town about her, they'd use words like shining, gifted, or golden girl. She was the basketball captain in high school, homecoming queen, the girl whose name teachers remembered even after retirement. And me? I was Haley's little sister. Never Willie. Just her shadow. I used to admire her. I used to think she was everything I wanted to be. I copied how she tied her shoes, how she braided her hair, how she even wrote her name with that swoopy Y at the end. But no matter how hard I tried to be close to her, she never saw me as anything more than an annoyance. A threat. A rival to be crushed. I'll never forget my 10th birthday. It was the first and last time I ever asked her to celebrate something with me. My parents had saved for months to buy me a purple bike with streamers and a bell. I was over the moon. I wanted to share that joy with Haley. I wanted her to try it first. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was icy. And then she wheeled my bike into the street and tossed it like trash right into the path of a delivery truck. I still remember the sound of the tires screeching. The crunch. The spark of metal and plastic. And then her shrug. Oops. I guess I slipped. No one believed me when I said it wasn't an accident. Why would they? Haley was the sweetheart, the golden girl. And I was the jealous little sister. From that day, I stopped showing my joy. I folded up my small victories and kept them to myself. An A+ on a math test? Hidden in my binder. A drawing praised by my teacher? Quietly taken down when no one was looking. My parents were always too busy working shifts at the hospital to notice. As long as Haley didn't see, I stayed safe. But one day, I forgot. I let myself believe it was safe. I had trained for months for the cross-country race. It was spring, I was 13, and I wanted to feel free. The wind, the speed, the finish line, it gave me a kind of joy I couldn't explain. And when I crossed that line first, beating every runner in my division, I looked out into the cheering crowd. I saw my mom. My dad. Even Haley. For a moment, I thought, maybe this time, she'd be proud of me. And then she collapsed. Right there on the school steps. Everything stopped. Teachers rushed to her side. Parents gasped. The medal ceremony was cancelled. Everyone forgot I existed. Later, when I looked into her eyes, I saw it, the glint of satisfaction. She had stolen my moment. Again. Still, I stayed silent. Still, I swallowed it. Until the day the Columbia letter came. I'd worked harder than I ever had for anything. Late night studying in the cold basement. Running my part-time job at the library. Writing, revising, rewriting my essays again and again. Columbia was my dream, and it felt impossible until it wasn't. I remember the moment my fingers tore open the envelope. We are pleased to inform you. I ran downstairs to show my parents. For the first time in years, their faces lit up with pride, just for me. Not Haley. Me. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. But the next morning, my world collapsed again. Elle, wake up. Haley's sick. Mom's voice shrieked from downstairs. I rushed down to find Haley curled on the couch, looking pale and fragile. Her head hung low. A manila folder lay beside her. She has stage 3 ovarian cancer, Mom whispered, tears falling freely. Dad stood behind her, already packing up my things. They didn't ask. They didn't question. I was told to give Haley my room so she could rest. I moved into the freezing basement, back among the cobwebs and dusty tools. My acceptance letter lay folded in my backpack. Uncelebrated. Forgotten. I watched Haley carefully. And little things didn't add up. She laughed at night on the phone. She posted selfies on a secret account with her long hair shining in the wind. She claimed to be on chemo, but I never saw her sick. No weight loss. No fatigue. No hair loss, except when she wore her carefully chosen wig. She was playing them. Again. And this time, it was worse than ever. I had to be sure. I had to gather proof. Because this time, she wasn't just stealing a birthday bike or a medal, she was stealing my life. So I started recording. Small, hidden voice recorders. Tucked behind books, under the couch, near her favorite window. I gathered nights and weeks of data. And when I played it back, my blood went cold. Laughter. Mocking. All I have to do is cough and Mom panics, she said one night. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I kept collecting. Then came her cancer courage party. Yes. A party. Haley invited the entire town to honor her battle. She stood in the backyard, under fairy lights, dressed in angelic white, pretending to be brave. Her head wrapped in a scarf. Her voice trembling on command. I stood beside her. And when she least expected it, I hugged her. My fingers gently peeled back the scarf. The crowd gasped as her long brown hair tumbled down. Silence fell. Then the video began to play. Her voice. Her laughter. Her lies. It was all there. But the crowd didn't turn on her. Not yet. She collapsed, screaming that I hated her. That I was cruel. My parents stared at me like I was the monster. I stood alone in front of everyone. My truth, exposed, but unwanted. I knew then, this wasn't over. It had just begun. After that night, I thought things might finally change. That maybe, just maybe, my parents would see the truth, hear the recordings, and understand that I wasn't the villain. But I was wrong. The next morning, the house was quiet, like a cemetery after a storm. I walked into the kitchen to find Mom sitting at the table, her face pale, hands shaking, a thick stack of papers in front of her. These are Haley's medical records, she whispered without looking at me. I froze. Where did they come from? I asked cautiously. She left them on the nightstand, Mom said. She must have felt so humiliated last night that she wanted to prove herself. Dad entered the room, rubbing his eyes, and sat beside her. We read every page. The diagnosis, the test results, even the chemo schedule. It's all real, Willie. I reached for the folder, flipping through the documents. Stamped letters from the local hospital. Prescription slips. Appointment reminders. Charts, signatures, scans. It looked real. Too real. But I knew Haley. I knew the way she planned. I knew the way she smiled when no one else was looking. She faked them, I said. She forged everything. Mom looked up, her eyes full of tears. Stop. Please. Just stop. Dad leaned back in his chair. Willie, we love you, but this obsession, it's not healthy. You've gone too far. Too far? I snapped, my voice breaking. She faked cancer to destroy my chance at Columbia. She's the one who's gone too far. You pulled off her scarf in front of 50 people, Mom said. You humiliated her. You embarrassed us. And that's when I realized, no matter what I said, no matter what I showed, they had already made up their minds. Haley was the sick daughter. The poor, brave fighter. And I was the bitter, jealous sister. I left the room without another word. My legs trembled as I descended into the cold basement, where I wrapped myself in a blanket and sobbed into a pillow to keep from screaming. The next day, I came home from school to find my laptop smashed on the floor. Shattered. Broken screen, bent keyboard. My essays. My portfolio. My application materials. All gone. I knew it was her. And I also knew she'd get away with it. Again. I rushed upstairs. Haley was in the kitchen, sipping tea, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me with a smirk. "Tech stuff's fragile," she said. "Hope you had backups." I clenched my fists. My nails dug into my palm. But I didn't react. She wanted me to explode. To look crazy. To scream so Mom and Dad would say, "See? This is why Haley's scared of you." I turned around and walked out. But that night, I made a promise to myself, if no one else was going to protect my future, I would. No more being quiet. No more waiting. I began rewriting everything on the old, dusty computer my school librarian had loaned me over the summer. The keyboard clacked loudly as I retyped my essays from memory, page by page, between sips of cold instant coffee. It was exhausting. But I didn't care. Rage kept me awake. So did fear. But beneath all that was something stronger, purpose. Then, a week later, it hit. An email from Colombia. "We have received an anonymous report regarding your conduct toward a terminally ill family member." My heart dropped. "Before we can finalize your admission, we must investigate the matter further." The words burned into my eyes. I read the email 10 times, hoping I'd misread it. I hadn't. Someone had filed a complaint. Someone had accused me of emotional abuse. I didn't need to guess who. But again, I had no proof. I couldn't point a finger without looking like the very thing she claimed I was: cruel, jealous, unstable. That night, I sat in the darkness with nothing but the computer glow on my face. I didn't cry. I just got to work. I remembered Dad once had a bunch of small voice recorders from a work project, a construction bid that needed documentation. I found them buried under a toolbox in the garage, dusty but intact. One by one, I checked them, changed batteries, formatted memory. Then, carefully, I began placing them around the house, behind photo frames, inside couch cushions, under the kitchen table. I didn't care if it was wrong. I was being erased, slandered, destroyed. And I had nothing left to lose. Over the next few weeks, I listened at night. I heard her laugh about Mom's tears. I heard her call me predictable, desperate, pathetic. I heard her tell her friends she was planning an epic collapse in front of Dad's coworkers next week just to keep the sympathy rolling in. She called my Ivy League dream the dumbest fantasy ever. "This is my spotlight," she whispered on one recording. "Willie can rot in that basement for all I care." I saved every clip. Every sentence. Every cruel word. I uploaded them to 3 different cloud drives. She wasn't going to destroy me. Not again. But I couldn't do this alone. And there was only one person in our family who had ever looked at Haley with skepticism. Aunt Carol. She was the one who once caught Haley lying about winning a spelling bee, because the school hadn't even hosted one. Haley cried for hours that day. But Aunt Carol never apologized. She said, "Truth matters more than tears." The next morning, I skipped lunch and called her from the school parking lot. My voice trembled as I explained everything: the party, the scarf, the fake tears, the recordings. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" When I finished, she said 5 words that made my knees buckle. "I'll be there this weekend." 2 days later, her old green pickup truck pulled into our driveway. She got out with a big box of cookies and a gentle smile. My mom hugged her. Haley faked a delighted surprise. And Dad grilled burgers on the back porch. It looked like any other family gathering. But Aunt Carol wasn't here for small talk. She was here for war. She asked Haley about her treatments. Asked gentle but precise questions about blood counts and side effects. Haley answered smoothly, but I saw Aunt Carol's eyes narrow just a touch with every contradiction. By afternoon, we were in the basement together, door locked. "Show me everything," she said. I opened the laptop. Hit play. She listened without blinking. By the end, she was gripping the arm of the chair so tightly her knuckles were white. When the last clip ended, she turned to me and said, "You're not crazy. And you're not alone anymore." That night, dinner was quiet. The stew was hot. The bread warm. But no one was really eating. Aunt Carol pulled her laptop out of her leather bag and placed it gently on the table. Her voice was calm. Her hands didn't shake. "I think it's time we all listened to something together." Haley froze. The screen lit up. Her voice played. "All I have to do is cough, and Mom panics." Mom's spoon clattered to the floor. Dad's jaw dropped. The table fell into complete silence as Haley's laughter echoed out of the small speakers. This time, they couldn't deny it. The air in the dining room felt like glass, cold and fragile, ready to shatter at the smallest touch. Haley sat motionless, her face pale as her own voice played from the laptop speakers. On screen, her laughter was crystal clear. The cruel kind. The kind you laugh when you think no one else is listening. Mom's hands covered her mouth. Her eyes blinked rapidly as if trying to unhear the words. Dad didn't say a thing. His face was unreadable, but his fingers tapped an uneven rhythm on the side of his water glass. He only did that when he was furious. Aunt Carol sat still, her hands folded, her tone firm. "There's more." The next recording rolled. "She's so easy to play. I cough, and she gives me the whole house." Haley giggled in the audio. "Elle's going to break soon. Maybe that'll finally shut her down." I sat across from her, not gloating, not even blinking. Just watching her unravel. When the third clip ended, one where she mimicked Mom's crying voice and burst out laughing like it was a comedy skit, Mom let out a choked sob. "Haley, no. No, this isn't real. Tell me it's not real." Haley turned toward her, mouth opening slowly. But no words came out. So Aunt Carol leaned forward. "If you have something to say, now's the time." I was venting," Haley stammered. That was taken out of context. Aunt Carol clicked a folder open. "Then explain this." Photos flashed across the screen. Haley posing at the lake with her friends, her long brown hair flowing. Her secret Instagram feed, her smile radiant, a drink in hand. The timestamp? The same day she'd claimed she was too sick to leave her bed. Haley jumped up. "This is an invasion of privacy. You had no right." "No," Dad said quietly, standing now too. "What you did to your sister, to all of us, that was the invasion." For a moment, no one moved. Haley's chest rose and fell quickly. She looked around the table like a cornered animal. "You're all just siding with Elle because she's the little angel now. None of you ever cared about me unless I was perfect. I had to fake being loved." Her scream echoed through the kitchen. Then she lunged. Straight at me. I didn't have time to react. Her hands gripped my arms and shoved me backward, so fast, so hard, I slammed into the side wall with a thud. The wind knocked from my chest. Mom shrieked. Aunt Carol bolted from her chair. But Haley wasn't finished. She swung again, this time at my face, but Aunt Carol caught her wrist mid-air. Dad leapt forward and grabbed her by the shoulders, dragging her back. And then, Haley went limp. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. She just collapsed into a sobbing heap on the floor. "I didn't want to be invisible anymore," she whispered. Mom dropped to her knees beside her, crying harder than I'd ever seen. Why, Haley? Why would you do this to your sister? To us? Haley didn't answer. But the damage was done. Aunt Carol pulled out her phone and called 911. Her voice never wavered. Yes. We need immediate psychological evaluation and assistance. It's urgent. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. Quiet lights. Calm voices. No sirens. The medics treated Mom's arm where Haley had scratched her, thin red lines now smeared with antiseptic. They checked me for bruises. I was fine physically, but something inside me had curled into a tight ball I didn't know how to unravel. I watched from the porch as they led Haley out. She didn't resist. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the floor, whispering to no one. As the ambulance doors closed, I felt something strange, not triumph. Not vengeance. Just emptiness. What do you feel when your enemy is your own sister? When the storm passes and the truth finally stands, but your heart is still broken? That night, our house was silent. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets, but the kind that follows devastation. We were all too tired to talk. I lay in the basement, staring at the ceiling, shivering despite the 2 layers of blankets. My mind kept playing back the moments, the slap of her hands against my shoulders, the shock in Mom's face, the way Dad had looked at Haley as if she were a stranger. But the truth was out now. I should have felt free. So why did I still feel like I was underwater? A week passed. Then 2. Haley was admitted to a residential treatment center in a neighboring state. A therapist specializing in factitious disorders had taken over her care. She was officially diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy behavior, except her proxy wasn't a child or a patient. It was her own reflection. The calls from Columbia came shortly after. Aunt Carol's attorney friend had helped us prepare a statement with all the recordings, digital footprints, and family confirmations. Willie, the admissions officer, said over the phone, "We are deeply sorry for the stress this has caused you. After reviewing your file again in full, we are thrilled to welcome you into the fall semester at Columbia University." My knees buckled. But this time, I cried tears I wasn't ashamed of. I told Mom and Dad, and for the first time in months, I saw pride in their eyes, real pride. Dad hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. Mom made her special lemon pie that night, even though it wasn't anyone's birthday. The house began to feel like a home again. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was neat. Familiar. Dear Elle. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want to tell you, I'm trying. I'm trying to understand why I did the things I did. You didn't deserve any of it. I was cruel. If someday you want to say hello again, I'd like to start there. H. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer. I didn't write back. Not yet. But something in me no longer hated her. I didn't need to. Because I had finally chosen me. I started the summer before college in a way I never expected, quiet mornings, deep breaths, and for once, peace. The house felt different now. Still. Honest. Like we were all figuring out how to speak again without walking on glass. Mom apologized one night in a whisper over the dishes. I should have seen it, Willie. I'm so sorry. Her hands trembled as she rinsed the plates. I could tell she'd been holding that apology for weeks. I nodded slowly, not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid if I opened my mouth everything would pour out again, everything I had buried. Instead, I just said, thank you. We didn't need to unpack all the years of hurt in one night. But that thank you, that apology, it was a start. Dad became quieter after everything. He spent hours sitting outside on the porch, watching the wind move through the trees, sometimes mumbling to himself like he was reviewing old memories he hadn't processed in years. One night, I brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "Do you remember that purple bike?" he asked out of nowhere. I froze. "I kept the bell," he added, reaching into his pocket. And there it was. Bent, scratched, but still intact. The same bell from my 10th birthday. The day everything between Haley and me started to crack. "I should have asked more questions back then," he said, handing it to me. "Instead of just assuming it was your fault for leaving it on the road." I didn't know what to say. So I just held it. That broken bell felt heavier than it looked. Like proof of all the moments people looked away. That summer became a quiet rebuilding. I worked part-time at the local bookstore to save for New York, and Mom helped me pick out dorm supplies. Dad taught me how to make my own budget spreadsheet. He even color-coded it with sticky notes like he did for hospital floor plans. Sometimes, we'd receive updates from Haley's treatment center. Mostly through her therapist. Things like, she's cooperating. She's attending group sessions. She's having good and bad days. I didn't know how to feel about it. Sometimes I'd read the updates and feel relief. Other times, guilt crept in like a shadow, asking if maybe I'd been too harsh. If maybe I could have handled it all differently. But then I'd remember the cold basement. The fake scarf. The smashed laptop. The email from Colombia. And I'd tell myself, you survived. You protected your truth. You didn't destroy her, you saved yourself. That mattered. Then, just a week before I was set to leave for college, another letter arrived. The envelope was light blue this time. Her handwriting looked steadier. "Dear Elle. They tell me I'm making progress. I don't always believe it. But sometimes, I remember the look in your eyes that night. Not hate. Just heartbreak. I think that's when something in me cracked. I've started journaling. And I realized something. You never wanted me to fall. You just wanted space to rise. If you ever want to write back, just tell me one thing. What does freedom feel like? H." I read the letter 3 times. This time, I wrote back. "Dear Haley. It feels quiet. And terrifying. And full of possibilities. Some days it still feels like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it also feels like a sunrise I thought I'd never see. Maybe you'll feel it too. One day. W." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. But sending it made my hands feel lighter. Like I'd finally let go of a brick I'd been carrying since I was 10. Move-in day came fast. Columbia's campus buzzed with students and laughter and so many accents I couldn't even place. I stepped out of the taxi with 2 suitcases and a racing heart. New York was loud. Messy. Beautiful. But I wasn't scared. I was ready. My dorm was on the 3rd floor of a historic-looking building with brick walls and arched windows. My roommate was a political science major from Atlanta named Bree. She had bright green nails, a louder laugh than I was used to, and a playlist for everything from brushing teeth to unpacking sweaters. "You're too quiet, Colorado," she said after our 3rd night. "What's your story?" I smiled, just a little. "Complicated." "Good," she said. "Those are the ones worth telling." She didn't ask more. And I didn't offer. But something about the way she said it made me believe, maybe, when I was ready, my story could help someone else. That it wasn't just pain. It was proof. Classes started. I buried myself in them. I sat in the front row. I asked questions. I studied late in the common room even when my eyes stung from lack of sleep. Every time I felt like slacking off, I thought of Haley's voice on those recordings, laughing about how I'd never make it. And I'd keep going. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was building a future she could never steal. One night in October, Bree burst into the dorm, tossing her coat on the chair. You got a letter, she said, holding it out. Looks official. It was from Columbia's Office of Student Recognition. I opened it slowly, carefully, like I was still afraid good news might bite me. Congratulations, Willie Anderson. You have been selected as one of this year's recipients of the Presidential Scholar Honor. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat on my bed staring at the letter. Bree raised an eyebrow. That good? I nodded slowly. Yeah. That good. She whooped and hugged me so hard I almost dropped the paper. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood by the window and stared out at the city lights, thinking of that cold basement, the cracked bell, the fake scarf, and how far I'd come. I whispered it aloud, just once. I made it. Thanksgiving break arrived sooner than expected. Columbia gave us 5 days off, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go home. A part of me was still afraid that stepping back into that house would feel like stepping back into the past, into the pain I had fought so hard to rise from. But I also missed Mom's too. Missed Dad's porch talk. Missed the mountain air. And even if our family was still healing, it was, at last, trying. So I went. The air in Colorado was thinner, sharper. That first morning back, I woke up to the sound of crows and pine branches tapping against the window. It almost felt like nothing had changed, until I looked around and realized I was no longer sleeping in the basement. They had moved me back upstairs. My room had been repainted. The cracked light bulb replaced. And on the desk sat a framed copy of my Columbia acceptance letter, neatly printed and set beside my old high school track medals. It didn't look like the shrine to lost dreams it once was. It looked like a place that finally belonged to me. Mom greeted me with a hug that lingered too long. She cried a little when she saw how tall I'd gotten. You look like someone I haven't met yet, she said. I feel like her too, I whispered. That night, we had dinner just the three of us. No big conversations, no heavy confessions. Just warm food, quiet laughter, and soft jazz playing from the kitchen radio. When I helped clear the table, I noticed something taped to the fridge. It was a photo of Haley and me. One from years ago, before everything fell apart. We were standing by the lake, both smiling. But now, someone had written across the bottom in ink. Start again, someday. Mom saw me looking. She sent it from the center, she said. Wrote the caption herself. I nodded, unsure what to say. We didn't talk about Haley much. Just brief updates. She was still attending therapy, she had joined a journaling group, and, apparently, had started helping with children's story time at the local library near the center. She's quieter now, Dad said one morning while he brewed coffee. Not sad. Just humbled. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't ready to forgive either. Forgiveness, I had learned, wasn't a switch you flipped. It was a door that opened slowly, only when you felt safe enough to turn the handle. And I wasn't there yet. 2 days before I was set to return to New York, a small envelope appeared on my old desk. No postage stamp. Just my name in soft handwriting and the scent of lavender clinging to the paper. It was from Haley. Again. Dear W. This week, we read a quote in group therapy that I haven't stopped thinking about. Shame dies when stories are told in safe places. For years, I turned our home into anything but safe, for you, for me, for all of us. I wore my pain like a crown and yours like a weapon. I'm not proud of the things I did. But I'm trying to understand why I did them. And every time I peel back a layer, I see more clearly just how much I envied you. You always rose quietly. And I screamed for attention. If you never want to speak to me again, I'll understand. But if there's ever a day when your heart feels brave enough, I'd like to sit across from you and just listen. No excuses. No lies. Just truth. H. I read the letter twice. Then folded it. then opened it again. That night, while the wind howled outside and snow began to fall softly, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and stared into the trees. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a survivor. No longer buried by what Haley had done, but standing in the open air, holding my story in both hands. Not to throw it in her face, but to carry it forward. Maybe we'd speak again. Maybe not. But for the first time, the possibility didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a choice. And that was enough for now. When I returned to campus, everything felt brighter. Not because the pain had vanished, but because I'd finally stopped running from it. Finals came and went. Bree and I stayed up all night before our statistics exam watching documentaries about jellyfish migration and eating too much instant ramen. I submitted my final essay for literature, one I titled The Sister Myth. My professor left a handwritten note on the last page. This was more than writing. It was healing. In January, I got an invitation to speak at a student-led event called Voices You Haven't Heard. The theme was truth-telling. At first, I declined. Then, one night in bed, I stared at the ceiling and remembered what Haley had written. Shame dies when stories are told in safe places. I emailed back the next morning. I'll do it. I didn't know what I was going to say until the moment I stepped up to the mic. The event was held in a small auditorium on Columbia's campus, nothing fancy, folding chairs, clip-on stage lights, a humble podium. But every seat was filled. Students, professors, even some city locals who came in for these monthly truth sessions. Bree sat in the second row, wearing a shirt that read, "Real Stories Matter." When they called my name, Willie Anderson, first-year literature major, my heart started pounding so loud I was sure the mic would pick it up. I walked slowly to the stage, my notes folded tight in my hand. The lights blinded me a little. My palms were damp. But then I looked out. And I saw something I hadn't seen in years. People, waiting to listen. Not to judge. Not to twist. Not to steal the moment. Just listen. I unfolded my notes and took a breath. My name is Willie, I began, and I used to live in a basement. Not because we didn't have rooms in our house. But because my sister convinced my family I didn't deserve one. A few people shifted in their seats. I pushed on. She said she had cancer. She said she was dying. She wore scarves and made speeches and even threw herself a party. I remember the lights, the cake, the banner that called her a hero. I paused, swallowing the tightness rising in my throat. And I remember pulling off her wig. Right there, in front of everyone. Because I had to. Because no one else would believe me otherwise. I heard someone in the back gasp. Bree straightened in her seat, eyes wide. For years, I continued, I thought being quiet was how you survived. That shrinking was safety. That success only painted a bigger target on your back. I stopped raising my hand in class. I stopped bringing home awards. I stopped speaking at all. A long silence settled over the room. But I'm speaking now. I looked up. Into their eyes. Because shame lives in silence. And mine lived in every moment I was told I was cruel for telling the truth. That I was jealous. Dramatic. Vindictive. My voice cracked a little, but I let it. I didn't hide it anymore. I'm not telling this story to get back at my sister. I'm telling it for every person who was blamed when they spoke up. For every daughter who lost her room. Every kid who had to bury their joy to keep someone else comfortable. A few heads nodded. A girl in the back quietly wiped her eyes. Today, I'm a Columbia student. A presidential scholar. A survivor of emotional abuse. And a sister who still doesn't know what the future holds. But I know this, truth deserves to be louder than lies. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one claps. even if your family stops looking at you the same. I stepped back, my hands trembling, and said, "Thank you." The room was silent for one long second. Then the applause came, not loud and explosive, but rising like a wave. Gentle. Strong. Real. Afterward, people came up to me. Strangers. Classmates. One girl said her cousin had faked a pregnancy to sabotage her college plans. Another boy whispered that his brother had once forged medical bills for sympathy and stole his graduation money. I wasn't alone. And neither were they. That night, Bree and I walked back to the dorm in the freezing cold, steam rising from our breath. She didn't say anything for a while. Just walked beside me, hands stuffed in her coat pockets. Then she said softly, "You should write a book one day. You'd change people." I looked at her, smiling. "You think anyone would read it?" She nodded. "You kidding? I'd pre-order it." 2 days later, I received another letter. From Haley. No lavender scent this time. Just clean stationery and a neat return address from the center. Dear W. They showed us a video today. A girl standing on stage, telling a room full of people how she survived being silenced. I watched her hands tremble. I watched her voice crack. I watched her tell the truth anyway. And I knew it was you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry for every time I made you feel invisible just to be seen myself. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But if you ever want to sit across from me one day, no mirrors, no masks, I'll be waiting. Thank you for saving yourself. It's the bravest thing you ever did. Love, H. I didn't cry. But I stared at that letter for a long, long time. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I folded it neatly, placed it in the same drawer with her other letters, and whispered aloud, "Maybe one day." Because I was learning now, closure doesn't always come from clean endings. Sometimes it comes from knowing you told the truth and survived the fallout. From knowing you didn't burn down the house to prove it was full of smoke. And sometimes it comes from realizing you never needed their permission to rise. Spring came to New York in bursts, one daffodil on a sidewalk, then two, and suddenly the campus bloomed into color. The city changed too. Jackets opened. People smiled more. The bitter wind eased. I'd made it through my first year. And I wasn't the same girl who arrived last August with fear in her throat and pain packed between every line of her college essays. I'd grown. Not just taller or sharper, but braver. Softer, too, in the places I had hardened just to survive. My literature professor approached me after class one day. "Willie," she said, "your final project was extraordinary. I showed it to a friend of mine in publishing. They'd like to speak with you." I blinked. "About what?" She smiled gently. "About your story." At first, I panicked. The thought of people reading what I'd written about Haley, the truth I had once buried so deep even my own parents refused to believe it, made me feel exposed again. Like I was standing on that backyard stage all over, ripping off a scarf no one wanted to admit was fake. But then I thought about the letters. The stories others had told me after my speech. The tears. The nods. The silent thank yous whispered after the auditorium cleared out. And I remembered that girl. The one who once sat in a freezing basement, holding a shattered laptop and a shattered heart, whispering to herself, "Don't cry. Don't let her win. She deserved to be heard." So I said yes. That summer, I began turning my story into pages. Not for revenge. Not for pity. But for truth. I changed names, moved settings, bent details, but the heartbeat stayed real. It was a story about siblings. About survival. About what happens when love turns cruel, and how one girl chose to reclaim her voice instead of her silence. Midway through the summer, I visited home again. The house was quieter now, not in a sad way, but in a settled way. Dad was rebuilding an old swing in the backyard. Mom had started taking pottery classes. And my room was still mine. There was one difference, though. On the bookshelf sat a new photo. Me, in front of the Columbia Library, holding my acceptance letter, my eyes full of sun and hope. Haley had sent it back with a note. Put this where it belongs. No more hiding your light. It was the first time she mentioned my name without bitterness. No games. No guilt. Just honesty. I hadn't seen her in person since the breakdown, but the updates from her therapist were steady. She was still in treatment. She was progressing. She had started leading peer support circles for other women struggling with identity-based disorders. I still wasn't sure if I wanted a full relationship with her again. But I'd stopped needing to punish her to feel whole. I had stopped needing her approval, her apology, her anything. Because I had become something else. Whole on my own. In August, I spoke at Columbia's freshman orientation. They'd invited student leaders to talk about resilience, and somehow, I made the list. I stood in front of a new crowd, bright-eyed kids just beginning their journeys. My name is Willie, I said, and for a long time, I let someone else write my story. I shrank so they could shine. I disappeared so they could be loved. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to stay small to keep others comfortable. You don't owe silence to anyone who builds power out of your pain. The applause was quiet at first. Then stronger. And afterward, one girl with trembling hands came up to me and said, "My sister's like that too." And I thought I was just being sensitive. I hugged her. And for the first time, I realized what healing looked like, not a grand finish line, but a slow blooming. A seed of truth taking root in someone else. A few weeks later, my first essay was published in an online journal. Title: The Day I Stopped Whispering. It was shared thousands of times. Strangers wrote in the comments. I lived this. This is my story too. This gave me the courage to finally speak. Haley messaged me a week later. Not to ask for forgiveness. Not to take credit. Just to say. I read it. And I cried. Thank you for telling it. Even if I wasn't ready to read it before. I replied with one sentence. Thank you for not pretending anymore. Now, as I sit at my window overlooking the Columbia Quad, sipping tea and watching the wind stir cherry blossoms loose from the trees, I realize something. We don't get to pick the family we're born into. We don't get to control who betrays us, who breaks us, who walks away. But we do get to decide what comes next. We get to write the second half. And mine? Mine is full of truth. And fire. And slow forgiveness. And freedom that no one, not even the sister who once tried to erase me, can ever take away again. So if you're listening right now, and someone's made you feel invisible. If someone's told you your pain is too small to matter. If you've been called bitter for daring to name what hurt you. Let this be your sign. You are not too much. You are not too loud. You are not too broken to rise. Your truth is powerful. And it's time to stop whispering. Some wounds leave scars. But those scars? They become proof that you survived, that you fought for your voice, and won. What did you think of Willie's journey? Have you ever been silenced by someone close to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where truth always finds a way to speak.